My name's Allie Young. I work with City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services as a capital project manager. The capital project is a long-term investment in the city, and it's something that we maintain for the long term as city infrastructure.
My name is Christa von Behren, and I am a natural resource ecologist with the Bureau of Environmental Services at the City of Portland. And so on this Tryon Creek restoration project, my role has been to manage all of the vegetation elements. So that has included kind of planning what we're going to put here, and then guiding the implementation process, monitoring, making sure that our plants are growing.
My name is Melissa Brown, and I am a senior fish biologist for the City of Portland. I work in the Bureau of Environmental Services as an environmental specialist, and I was the biologist on this project. When the Boones Ferry Road was built over Tryon Creek, the engineers filled the creek with roadway fill and routed the stream through a large culvert underneath all of the fill in the roadbed. And Arnold Creek comes into Tryon Creek as a tributary right at the bridge. So the culvert would be racked with wood fairly regularly, creating a backwater effect that was starting to undermine the fill of the road. So over time, the stream adapted to that culvert, and at the outfall of the culvert, scoured a large, deep pool that also lowered the water surface elevation of the stream against the culvert, which created a jump height that was too high for native fish to be able to pass. So essentially, the culvert at Boones Ferry Road was a major passage barrier. Our local coastal cutthroat trout were able to navigate it bidirectionally during certain times of the year. But we felt that after focusing on fish passage at the Highway 43 culvert, once that is replaced and passage is restored there, that we would be getting more anadromous fish up in the watershed. And the habitat upstream of here is wonderful for salmon and trout and lamprey to spawn and rear and then migrate back out to the Willamette River. Historically, we had runs of Chinook salmon, steelhead, trout, and coho salmon adults that could navigate throughout the watershed before the roads and the barriers were built. We know that those fish are still attempting to make their way up to this part of the watershed because we conduct surveys downstream at the Highway 43 culvert. We have all of those species that use the lower quarter mile of Tryon Creek that is connected to the Willamette River. So lamprey have not been spotted in the upper reaches of Tryon Creek, save for some Pacific lamprey amicetes that U.S. Fish and Wildlife tagged and planted in the stream, hoping to attract adults to navigate the barrier at Highway 43 and come up to where the amicetes were living in soft sandy substrates in pockets downstream of here. We have not detected Pacific lamprey other than those planted amicetes since then. However, we know that Tryon Creek, as a cold water source in the lower Willamette River, it does attract migratory fish that are moving upstream. And the Pacific lamprey population in the upper watershed of the Willamette River is fairly strong. There is a Native American fishery there every year at the falls, which is about 4 miles upstream of here, 2 miles, 4 miles. And so we're hoping that with improved access, we'll get some migratory fish that come up and successfully spawn and then produce pheromones that will travel downstream and attract more fish in the future. My field partner, Chad Smith, and I regularly monitor fish populations in Tryon Creek throughout the watershed year-round. And our most prolific fish that we catch in the stream is cutthroat trout. And Tryon Creek has a very robust, genetically healthy population of coastal cutthroat trout. We find them in all life stages, so they are the predominant fish that migrate throughout the watershed. We have captured juvenile coho on a few occasions, and we are thinking that they are migrating upstream from the Willamette, or because we know that adults don't navigate the culvert and spawn in the stream yet. Coho salmon juveniles overwinter for a year and a half. Well, they rear in their in freshwater for a year and a half before they smolt and start heading out to sea. So they are highly migratory and looking for a place to overwinter in a stream, which would be a deep pool, an off-channel habitat, a side channel, or a pond. We've got sculpin in the stream, reticulate sculpin. The reticulate sculpin, as adults, can get up to about 4 inches, but we are usually catching them in the mid-range and smaller. We do catch young of year. The cutthroat juveniles, the young of year, are only 1.5 inches long when we catch them. Marshall Park upstream is a hotbed for catching cutthroat juveniles, so we think that they're spawning relatively close to that reach. And we have caught adult coastal cutthroat that are, a foot or so in size. So all age classes, all very healthy fish. It's pretty cool. So as far as other wildlife that live in the watershed and use Tryon Creek for habitat, signal crayfish, which is our local native crayfish, have populated the watershed. I know that raccoons love the crayfish population here. Macroinvertebrates are aquatic bugs that you can see with your naked eye, and they reproduce in the stream and transform their larvae, which rear in the water, to adults, which feed fish. And the macroinvertebrates that are most common in Tryon Creek, I believe, are the Coleoptera, which are beetles, and Ephemeroptera, which are mayflies, Odonata, which are dragonflies, and Trichoptera, the stoneflies. So all of those insects are delicious fish food. As any fisherman will tell you, most flies are tied to resemble those 4. Yeah, macroinvertebrate populations are a really good indicator of stream water quality health. The 4 that I just mentioned, which are common in this watershed, are indicative of good water quality. So they are part of a biological index that we refer to when we're assessing stream health. It's one indicator that we use. So Tryon Creek is a highly urbanized watershed. The headwaters near Multnomah Village on the other side of Interstate 5 flow down through some pretty sticky habitats, culverts and bridges, and it's been highly transformed to an urban environment. That creates flashiness in the stream. When it rains, it's the Tryon Creek is collecting stormwater, which the Bureau of Environmental Services has tried to pull as much off the system to be treated prior to entering the stream. Bioswales and containments will settle water and pull pollutants out before releasing cleaner water downstream. So the flashiness creates a very high velocity environment that can flush smaller, weaker fish out. The development that's happened with parking lots and homes and roads and everything else, it does put stress on the ecosystem to withstand environmental pressures like rising temperatures and water quality.
This is a before during winter conditions of the culvert. This is during summertime, and here's Boones Ferry Road before the bridge was put in and was replaced with this beautiful bridge right behind us. So this bridge now opens up the creek so that it can be free flowing and not in a culvert. What we were able to do is make the creek wider and make the bed of the creek more stable to withstand the energy of the water coming from upstream.
Pre-project, of course, the stream was a lot narrower and there was vegetation growing up to the edge of the creek. So to widen the creek, that vegetation had to be removed. So some trees were cut as well as some shrubs. All of that material stayed on site. Wood is a really important habitat element, and that's something that we often don't have a lot of in urban natural areas. So it's really great that we could keep all of that wood on site, and the shrubs as well, to have some brush piles for things like nesting birds.
We designed a project that would remove the culvert and bring the stream bed up and slope it at a point where fish at any life stage would be able to pass this reach.
It's not the easiest thing to construct a new creek channel. So what the contractors did, the first thing they had to do was block off the creek and basically dry it out so that you could build within the creek channel. And what they did was set up a diversion pipe underneath the bridge, and it discharged at the downstream of the project area. And of course, screens are set up on that to keep fish from going into the pipe. And with some tinkering, it ended up working out. Water wants to go where it wants to go, and so it took a little bit of time to get the dam sealed up just right and dry out the area. Before they can work in the creek and dewater all the rest of the water that's left in there, we need to safely move the fish and other animals that remain. And so a team from BES came out and salvaged, that's the word that we use, is salvaged the fish and other animals that were in the creek and moved them to a safe location. And once that was done, they were able to pump out the rest of the water and begin bringing their materials and equipment in. 2 excavators drove in down that slope off of Boones Ferry and began building this new creek bed from the downstream section up. And the way that they did that was they brought in a mix of rock materials from small to large and layered in the rock materials in lifts, compacted that, then poured in like a silty sand mix to fill up the voids so that we wouldn't get water going through that rock and into the groundwater. And so they built that up into 2 major lifts from the downstream up. And then when that was complete, they laid back this section of bank so that we could get more space for in the wintertime when flows come down and they're high, the flows are high, there's more space for water to move up onto the banks. Yeah, the water can come up as high as, you can see the top of this bank. I haven't seen it yet, since this is a new project, I haven't seen it yet come up that high, but we designed it to come up that high during to mimic kind of one of the biggest events you might see coming down this creek, yeah. So yeah, this creek gets a lot of water in the winter and then very little water in the summer, and that's a challenge, both for fish and to construct a new creek and to design it to accommodate that kind of regime.
So the summertime flows of Tryon Creek ramp down to about 1 CFS, which is very low, as you can see. The stream becomes really bony and it warms up, and so that really emphasizes the importance of refuge pockets throughout. So my favorite element of a river is large wood. Historically, massive trees, and little trees too, would be pulled into the stream by high flows, and the river would sort all of that material and often create jams of wood that really scour the bed and create deep pockets of habitat. Wood is just so wonderful in that it's a natural source for rest and feeding. And so where we can, we like to incorporate large wood as stability elements, but also for creating habitat immediately until our riparian area that gets planted after a project matures enough to be able to fall into the river and create that habitat itself.
Immediately after the construction was finished, we put seed down. It actually went under this erosion control matting that you can see here. They put that fabric down to make sure that all of the soil on the slopes stays on the slopes. If it gets into the stream, it can cause some water quality issues. So we really want that material to stay where it is. So they put seed down underneath the fabric so that it has good contact with the soil, and then it can grow up through that matting. It was a mix of native grasses and wildflowers. Right on up against the creek here, some water-loving things, and then some things that like drier conditions higher up on the slope. So we put seed down in the fall right after the construction was finished, and then we came back in February, which is our main planting season, and we planted trees and shrubs. We did a lot of big willow stakes, big cuttings that tend to establish pretty quickly. A cutting is kind of what it sounds like. They go to an existing tree or shrub and cut off a branch. And this is like this really amazing magical thing that a lot of plants can do. And then when you stick that branch in the ground, it will actually root and form a new tree or shrub. So they tend to establish really well in riparian areas, so we like to use cuttings a lot. And then for most of our other plants, trees and shrubs, we plant bare root seedlings, which usually, like if you plant something in your yard, you get plants in a pot and it comes with some dirt in it. We get plants that they're seedlings that come with they're not in a pot with no dirt on them, and they're dormant. So we get them in like groups of 50 and in bags of sometimes up to 500 or 600, and store them in a cooler in the wintertime, and then we come out and plant them. And the reason we like to use those is because it's just really efficient to plant. Right on the riparian area, there were lots of willows, dogwood, spirea, salmonberry. In terms of trees, cottonwood and cedar, alder. And then higher up on the slope, some Doug fir, cascara, some Oregon grape, maple, yeah, a mix of things. Yeah, our goal is to get a good mix in terms of both species and structure. So. I am standing in a wetland that doesn't look like a wetland right now because it is very dry in mid-August, but in the winter it gets much more wet. Right behind me is the slope up to Arnold Street. Arnold Creek is in front of me, and that flows into Tryon Creek, which is this way, and it goes under the bridge over here. So I'm southwest of Tryon Creek and the bridge. This is a wetland that we constructed as part of the 2020 bridge project. When the bridge went in, one of the bridge footings impacted a little bit of wetland that it's adjacent to. And for any kind of construction project, you're not allowed to just fill in a wetland, impact a wetland, and not do anything about it, which is good because wetlands are really important. So because we were impacting that wetland, we built a wetland here. So we call it our CWMA, or compensatory mitigation area, which is how the state refers to it. So wetlands, of course, provide a lot of really important functions on the landscape. They hold a lot of water when it rains, and of course, we get a lot of rain here. So having that water holding capacity to kind of recharge groundwater throughout the year is really important. Provides really important habitat for wildlife. So all kinds of birds and lots of other critters really like the vegetation in wetlands. So the vegetation here is actually quite similar to what's on the stream banks. Wetland vegetation is just vegetation that likes water, pretty much. So a lot of these plants also like to be on the edges of streams. This is a forested wetland, so these are trees, mainly shrubs, that not only like to be wet, but are happy to be in more of a shaded location as well. You're seeing a lot of dogwood, which is this plant here. And again, a lot of these were installed as cuttings. So they just really took off quickly. We've also got a little baby cedar here. And if you can see all the way over here is some salmonberry. So these are all things that like to be a little bit wet. On the ground, you can see that right here where we're standing, there's quite a bit of bare ground. There was, a few months ago, a lot of a buttercup, which is non-native. And it's a plant that's pretty ubiquitous, and on a lot of our projects, we don't even worry about it because it's not super aggressive or anything. But because this project is so heavily regulated by the state, they really wanted to see just native vegetation here. So we came through and weeded out all the buttercup, and right now there's a lot of bare ground, but we'll in the fall be putting in more seed and more native wetland plants. Like this is slough sedge, which is a great native wetland plant, and some other things. We'll put in some rushes. So hopefully over the next 6 months, year, it'll fill in quite a bit. You can't see it right here, but maybe a year ago, I planted some wapato kind of in around the pond. Didn't see anything for a while, figured it didn't work. And then about a month ago, when I had a contractor out here, he texted me and said, there's wapato in this pond. I came and looked, and there's all this little baby wapato. So it's really exciting. It's a native plant. It's a native plant that is really important to a lot of indigenous cultures in the region. And it's one that we've started working with a little bit, but haven't yet had a ton of success reestablishing it. So seeing it on our projects is always really exciting.